morning and welcome to Tuesday. And we are looking at Joseph in charge of Egypt. So Genesis chapter 41 verses 41 through 57. So go ahead and read it on your own, but I'm going to highlight a few things here that we see. So first of all, Pharaoh, we're going to read in 44. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift hand or foot in all of Egypt. So basically what's happening here is Pharaoh is putting him as prime minister. He is second in charge. So let's think about this. It's been 13 years since Joseph had been sold to Egypt. So he's 30 years old now. So this climb to the top, it didn't happen overnight. There was years of humility, years of dependence on God, years of trial and persecution, and finally now he is elevated to a position of status and influence. But we'll see here, there's nothing that says that even though he has arrived, that now he turned his back on God. He is still following God. And Pharaoh notices that. Pharaoh knows that because the name, he gives him a new name, and this name means God speaks and he lives. Isn't that beautiful? God speaks and he lives. And he gives him a wife, and his wife gives him two sons, and let's look at the sons' names. The first one is a Manasseh, and it says, for God made me forget all my toil. So God made him, he wasn't bitter, he wasn't dwelling on, all these horrible things happen. My brother sold me, I was falsely accused, I got forgotten. No, he was able to focus on the goodness of God. And Ephraim, it says, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Egypt was not his land, it was not his home, it was not his chosen place to go to, but God blessed him and caused him to be fruitful there. So for 7 years, God put him as a person to not just interpret this dream, but he gave him wisdom to execute this plan, right? So he gave a tax of 20%. And because of that, they said there was so much food that that he put the food, huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. That's how much they were able to store away. To think about the beauty of this, right? Because it wasn't enough to say, we're going to have 7 good years, let's live it up, and then we're going to die, right? And 7 years of famine. But Joseph had wisdom to let's plan ahead so that we could have food later in the famine. And so then the 7 years of abundance came to an end. And now the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. But here's one thing to point out. The famine didn't just affect Egypt, but Egypt was the only one who was prepared because of Joseph's insight and because of what God had led him to do. But the famine affected every place around them. And so because of that, they needed food, and they're going to be led to Egypt as a supplier of food. So we'll see already as God is orchestrating events of reconciliation of Joseph and his brothers. So just think about that. Think how God wants you to respond today to his word. Have a good day. And remember, 5 minutes in the word can change your life.